Welcome back to the channel. I'm in Atlanta Airport after a long week of training. I have a training update to share with you, something that should make you feel pretty good about all of our advancements and our techniques. I have some pictures to share with you. Also, I wanted to share with you that impossible repair I was talking about. So I hope to see you back in the studio. Recently, we discussed how difficult it can be to get adhesion on polyurethane. Here is an aftermarket dash that one of my customers purchased made of polyurethane, and here's an advisement in the second paragraph. This dash pad is made from polyurethane material that resists dirt and discoloration. Do not attempt to paint this dash pad, as most paints will not adhere. So this advisement reinforces to us that we cannot afford to skip any pertinent step when prepping and dyeing polyurethanes. Having that ability, though, makes the Mobile Tech more valuable than ever before. As typically happens before a training class, I seem to have a load of work come in, and the mantra for me when I have a project like this is to push the project forward from the very first day and push it forward every day so that you don't get caught short on time at the very end. And as it was, they missed giving me some parts on these seats. Well, we were able to do it in time. And here they are in the cargo van, all ready to be delivered back. I got 2 months' notice prior to the class, so I immediately went out and started gathering up used car parts. Here we have over $300 worth of car parts. And it's a good thing I started right away and pushed the project forward, because with certain people getting sick during that time with the flu that was going around, it just so happened we needed all the time to get this stuff shipped. So once again, that saved me. Push the project forward from day one. So now it was time to travel, and we had this reassurance here from Delta. You're boarding soon, but no need to hurry. You're not that important. So I traveled alone this time. Last time, Aranita went with me, but she doesn't like to fly. In fact, that flight there, I had to drag her kicking and screaming onto the airplane. And then you should have heard her. On arriving, it was good to meet up with Lee, who is a viewer of this channel. I really enjoyed getting to know him over a very authentic Mexican burrito. I can rest assured you there was nothing left of that bad boy right there. Lee was very appreciative of all the work that goes into producing these videos. For example, we gather all of the video clips, but then to get them over into the timeline, adjusted for length, that takes about 3 hours right there. That's not the voiceover, and that's not the titles, and that's not the editing for length to fit the voiceovers. And so you may have heard that to produce a video for YouTube requires about 1 hour for every minute of finished video, and that's about true, and especially true when you're doing instructional videos. So yes, a 20-minute video would have required 20 hours of production. You could add to that the extra time it takes to set up and record initially. Thanks again, Lee, for your hospitality, and hopefully we can meet up again. Also, prior to this class, I made some adjustments in the workbook. As we handle each class, we see where we can refine the class a little bit. And this time I also made a page here which consolidates all of the different kinds of hand stitching, so that when we review, they can be all in one place. And it helps to compartmentalize these ideas for the new technician. One adjustment that I've made in the schedule is to start right in immediately with vinyl repair and some hand stitching. That way, we have a good foundation for moving on to any field repairs that become available. Doing as much in the way of field repairs as we can gives realism to our training, so we want to take advantage of those opportunities. The other reason is that a lot of folks have trouble with hand stitching. As a matter of fact, most of the techs coming don't understand that they're going to be doing any stitching at all, so this is totally foreign to them. Now, I try to educate them as to how to hold the needle so that they don't struggle, and that involves the curve of your index finger lays right on the very top curve of the needle, and your thumb supports the needle midway. The reason for that is all of your energy is transferred to the point of the needle. So when you need to exit the fabric, all the energy is going into the point. Holding the needle any other way is a waste of energy. The energy in any other direction tends to want to straighten out the curved needle, and that deprives the point of the needle of the energy it needs. So you're struggling, especially in leather. And I don't like to see this struggling, but yet if I continue to remind the student of the correct way to hold the needle, I feel like I'm badgering them, and we don't want that. So my job is to try to make it easy for the student, not to cause pain and suffering. Although when you think about no. So by starting early on the first day on these things, we have a chance to correct these things in a little bit at a time, perhaps in each successive day. And that really worked out good for this class. I thought you might like to see some of the highlights from the class. This is a damage we created. And of course, a damage in cloth this large presents some real structural challenges. This is the kind of repair that makes you think. So this entire repair was done by the student in preparation for a field repair we knew we had coming up. In fact, we had a couple we're going to show. But the object of this study right here was to avoid what we see in the field, namely that people form a stone or a pebble in the seat when they put too much adhesive, too deeply, and then, as you can see, it wants to come out. This picture is a cross-section of that plug in the seat. It's thicker than the cloth, but we want to repair that's the exact same thickness as the cloth is, and that moves freely with the cloth, so we don't feel a pebble when we push down on the cloth. We solved that problem in the previous century, and here we are a quarter of the way into the new century. Well, the students feel really good about the results from a newer method. This is one of the field repairs that we had lined up. It's not a supercritical repair. It's on an Amazon delivery van. Can we make it not a hole? Of course, there'll be some compromises, but this is a good one for the student. And you can see I've drawn a guideline here for this very wide pull. So we appreciate that such a wide pull is going to make a deviation, but what a beautiful stitch line for this double needle blind stitch that this student did on his very first field repair. In our workbook, we have this note under the double needle blind stitch: on the French seam or flat felled seam, use half of the fold. How can we demonstrate this? Well, we did in the class. This is a typical damage from sliding out of the seat, and the damage is limited to that bolster panel. In this case, we can make a compromise by replacing the top stitch of this French seam with a blind stitch. So where the fold is in the original French seam, we want to use half of that fold. And because it is a fold, we have the challenge of traveling underneath just the top layer of leather. That's going to make our job so much easier than trying to penetrate through both of the layers in that fold. So you might ask, won't that really hurt because now that fold is only going to be half the width? Well, not necessarily. Here we are several stitches along, and you can see that we have replaced that top stitch with the blind stitch. But there is also greater tension where we've stitched it, meaning that that stretches that fold even more. So it's almost stretched to the same width as the original width of the fold. And that is your free tip Friday. Burritos accepted, of course. Now, as this seat is set on over time, that seam will also flatten out as the original has. The class also duplicated this metallic coating on plastic in a place where it's very typically needed, and they're reminded that every use of the paint gun in our industry is artistic more than conventional. We also took the time to change the one side again to imitate a powder coating look. We took time also to discuss the variations of black when doing a matte finish. For example, this is the rental car, and the dash has a matte finish. Remember, in aircraft, this is called a glare shield, hence the need for the matte finish. The basis for the color is black, but when you put the flattener to it, it lightens up the black. So the lesson there is, whenever you need a matte finish, add the flattener first, because the chances are you will not need to lighten the value using a lighter pigment. The matte finish may also give a different feel. So it's not slippery, it's not shiny, but it seems like when I try to duplicate this like new finish, I get pushback from customers and other technicians alike. And what is funny is that the Alcantara steering wheels are touted as giving you better grip. So if that's a factor, why make these leather ones so slippery? Why not restore them to their factory matte finish and grip? This is another serious field repair, and the first time doing such a repair for one of the new technicians. Again, this was a structural challenge, but the beauty of it, it wasn't that difficult because we had all of the steps in the method which all worked in unison. It looked even better installed in the vehicle out there in the sun. And we have one more to show. Our students probably will not be fixing this kind of severe damage, but this is one on one of the seats I purchased, so why not put everything together? Meaning we have learned all of the skills necessary for each step of this repair, and when we stack all of those skills together, we end up with a favorable result. One thing we were also demonstrating here, as you can see some variation in the texture, is that the more we heat the vinyl, the greater definition of texture we get. And for the beginning student, there is a reluctance to put as much heat as you need to really get that texture. So it's a leap of faith for the new student. And that's what we're demonstrating here as well. When you really give it the beans and soften that finish, a greater depth of texture can be had. Something really interesting happened with this class. There were many people that have been in the industry for a long time, decades, that have come by and seen all of these repairs. And they're saying, that's the best repair I've ever seen. Yet, I'm watching and I'm seeing that this is the students' very first repair they've done by themselves. So if the very first repair that the students are doing are the best repairs they've ever seen, what does that say? Well, it says that there's something about the method, right? The efficacy of the method is undeniable at this point. And to hear and to see all of this, what a reward for putting this program together. I hope you've enjoyed that brief review of the class. And now we're going to get on to the repair that I promised you, which I called the impossible leather repair. So the leather in this mid-80s Rolls-Royce is so dried as to be like cardboard, and that's why I'm calling it the impossible repair. How can we close up this hole in what's basically dried out cardboard? So that's the challenge. And while the finish is also dried and cracked, we know that we can sand away that existing finish and perhaps get down to the leather, which we're hoping will need very little repairing, if any, in those areas. But let's take a look at this dried out spot first. The best way to remove this dried finish is by using a sand away product, wet, and that way it dissolves everything that we're sanding, and we're using 100 grit paper to get the job done. So we're going to do the exact same process for both seats. As you can see, we're making quite a mess here getting all that finish off of there. So we can come back with some alcohol and clean it all up. After the seats have had time to dry, you will find that 400 sandpaper will smooth it all out, because the initial process seems to work a lot like wood, where it raises the grain a little bit. So 400 is necessary, and then clean up. So the real question I had going in here is, how much can we pull this leather together without further ruining it? Because being so dry, our thread can pull this leather apart. Well, as you see, I started by poking holes. So we have holes in it to start with, and that's the gentler way of making the holes, is with that heavier needle. Here, of course, we use the baseball stitch. And whenever we use the baseball stitch, we never want any one stitch to be holding all the weight. We want to share the force amongst many stitches. So as I'm working, I'm gently pulling a little bit and seeing what's going to happen naturally, just a little bit. And I'm sort of surprised that it came together this much. But notice I also put pressure down on the cushion, collapsing the cushion so that the leather is free to come together. So really for me, it's trial and error here to see what the seat will let me get away with. And so far, by compressing the cushion and then snugging up the thread, and having all of those stitches share the load, I think this is working out pretty good. Better than expected. Here I'm gently coaxing it, seeing what more I can get. Gently working it some more, I'm compressing the cushion, and I'm taking my scissors, and you could see if I got out of the way, I'm taking my scissors and just pulling on the thread along the way. Now, as I snugged it up, and I'm getting the leather to mate up, I can put a little bit of a flexible, thicker super glue right where it mates. Keep that snug. Here you can see I'm using the scissors again just to grab a hold, just giving me some leverage there. And I'm holding that leather mated together with that very slow drying, thicker super glue, and accelerating that. So that glue is not wicking up into the leather fibers, just securing it where it mates. It actually acts as a lock stitch at the same time. So we're getting a little extra support here along the way. So I don't want any of that super glue on the surface of the leather at all. Let's let the first structural component be the stitching, and the second structural component is a lock stitch or just a bit of mating glue for the two leather surfaces. And now that I've got everything snugged up, I can finish my stitch, tie a knot, bury the tails. So I was surprised, but I was able to gently coax this leather together without ripping it out with the stitching. And this part you've seen many times before. We're going to take just a short segment of ironing. Don't take the whole job at one fell swoop. It's too big. Just take a little section at a time. Ironing the stitching flat, watching our heat, not puckering the leather. So the repair compound then is also a structural component. That's our third structural component. Any flaky edges, you can feather them out. Because the leather is so dry, it's going to allow me to impregnate this leather adhesive deep down into the fibers. Any excess cleans up with alcohol. Well, we've given both seats a good working over. Maybe we're halfway there. So I've elected to use some air dry filler to feather my repair. Now, you can sometimes spread this dry with the towel and it fills in and levels nicely. Sometimes you may want to spread it with some of your color to get it to feather out. And you never know from job to job which is best. So this is always a judgment call for you, the technician. Of course, while we're at it, we're putting some guide coat on the whole seat to see what needs fixed and what further filling needs to be done on the rest of it. Here, of course, I'm not sanding the filler per se. I'm sanding the nibs off of the finish. Wiping in the color like this sometimes leaves some trash in the surface, so 400 just knocks those off and we're ready for the next step. Remember, fillers are not cured until the next day. Rick's rule of thumb. We have a couple of spots that don't need a structural repair, just a superficial one. The second seat gets the nibs knocked off of it as well. And just out of frame, a little filler in a spot that doesn't need anything structural. and another one. Hard to get to? Remember, we're not sanding the fillers. If you need to sand it, do it chemically. And that avoids tearing them out and starting over. Here I've elected to give a skin to the seat overall with a minimal amount of filler spread and feathered with color. And with 400, we can knock off the nibs and travel on. So as you noticed, we didn't make the seats absolutely perfect. We have the rest of the vehicle to take into consideration, and we needed these seats to match the backrest. So this is the level at which it will look like it belongs in the car. And speaking of the rest of the car, we had a few things to tidy up there. The top of this armrest was in a similar condition, so we had to bring that up a little bit. The backrests of both seats needed resurfacing, as well as those center armrests, and the black trim, of course, needed to be highlighted again. Now, the driver's seat that we repaired the big hole in, that is now on the passenger side here, since those seat bottoms are interchangeable, and they simply lift out with your hands, no tools involved. So the better seat bottom went over to the driver's side, and hopefully that will extend the life of the interior that much more. Right after this, the car was going on the market. It was so important to the owner that when we finished our work, he wanted it to look like it hadn't been worked on. The seats were supposed to be representative of the age of the car, and I think we lifted it up to that level. Thanks for joining in and being a part of the repair community. We'll look for you next time.